disappointed if
Get us warmed up.
I don't want to disappoint you, Andre.
We're not talking about quantum physics, I guess.
Yeah,
No, no,
we
no, no, no.
are. Human behavior.
Yeah,
Same.
right. Yes.
Okay, so we're back online, and we're almost finishing our 24-hour marathon. We only have two more segments, and it's extraordinary. It's a blessing that we were able to convene these two wonderful humans, uh, Andre Mamprin and Ainsley Rose. They're both in Canada. They've got a very unique perspective on what motivates us today, which is change in education. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a minute, but they come from different fields with a very unique perspective. Andrea is a corporate consultant and he's worked with all kinds of executive leaders. He has developed some fascinating theories on leadership, organizational renewal, and he's a bold and visionary thinker. Ainsley is one of he's an educator's educator. I always say that he's done everything in education, um, being a principal, a teacher, led organizations. He's a consultant, he's an author, an inspirational speaker, loved by everybody. Currently, I've extricated him from his role in the leadership retreat in Quebec, where he started this movement, and he's done it. He's just shared with us off the microphone that this is the 19th. No, how many cohorts did you say? Yeah,
Well, this is the
19th.
19th year.
The 19th year. Okay, okay. And you also have 19 people. It's quite a coincidence. That
Yeah,
threw me off.
that's
Yeah.
true.
So thanks for being here today with us. Um, uh, what motivates us today is to try to explore how education can and needs to change. So let's start by asking each of you a little bit about your journey, how you've arrived at where you are, and what your perspective is on change in education from your different viewpoints. So whoever wants to start, feel free.
Go ahead, Andre. You've got a more
Thank you,
interesting
Ainsley.
story to
Thank you,
tell.
Gabriel. Gabriel, just a special hello to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And Gabriel, I want to say a special shout out to you. This 24 hours in education
Yeah.
is just absolutely remarkable. I know this is maybe your second or third year, and it's just phenomenal what you guys are doing here. So I just want to say that. My background, I guess, in short, oil and gas manufacturing, and then banking, and in all of those roles, I got really compelled by the question of leadership. So I started out with systems and processes, systems engineering, and all that kind of thing. But then it ended up for me that humans drive the actual agenda and create the value and do all of that thing. So I got into consulting, I would say, almost 20 years ago. And so I had probably 25 years working with organizations all over North America, anything from 200 employees right up to 28,000, 30,000 employees. So yes, you mentioned leadership and Ainsley, I know a lot of your work and what you think and write on. Leadership's a big factor. But before we even get to the big leadership conversation and all of these interesting ideas around that, how humans behave, just before we were having a quick chat around conflict, some of those types of things. I would say to you, the root of all of this is education. And so I've worked tirelessly, not as tireless as Ainsley or Gabriel, but I do what I can in the education space to disrupt it, to move it along, to evolve it. Because if we don't have, moral, ethical, critical thinkers in the workplace solving our big complex problems, then it's all for naught, really. So I'll just start with that little chunk to kind of get us going. But Ainsley, I know you're a big thinker on this one, so I'll turn it over to you.
I'm hardly that, Andre, but thank you for the accolades. I too, being a longtime friend of Gabrielle's, we we met, interestingly enough, when I went down to Buenos Aires to present to the ESARP conference that continues. Likewise, it's an initiative that still continues thanks to his leadership, and we became friends and have been friends ever since. In fact, he took the opportunity to bring his whole family to Canada and came and spent some time with us in our home, and we tried to show him what the best of our little part of the world in British Columbia was all about, which was a very special opportunity. I've had the opportunity with my wife to visit him in his school down there, and with his wife Inez graciously had us over for dinner and so forth. So longtime friendships continue, and we haven't crossed paths of late because the guy's traveling the world. Can't keep track of him other than on Facebook, which is really helpful. But I have very humble beginnings. I started, this is my 53rd year as an educator. And I came into the world of education by chance, not by design. I became a teacher. In fact, I think if I were to really look back at my career, I don't think there was anything that I actually applied for. But my evolution through education has always been happenstance, and because of the quality of people that I seem to be associated with who saw something in what in how I thought about education, and I evolved through the system to the point where now I'm in my 18th or 20th year of retirement, but I failed retirement 3 times, mostly because of the passion continues to burn with regards to trying to help manage this complex, I would say. We're in a session right now, and a very dear friend and colleague of mine is presenting. She got her PhD in the work that she has done on well-being around the world, and it's such an appropriate topic to be talking about at this time, given what we're seeing, what I'm seeing in terms of the lack of change and the
Ainsley, you might want to move to
retraction,
somewhere
if
where you have a
you
stronger.
will.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ainsley. We're
Sort
losing a little bit of what you're saying.
of
So
the
if there's
systems
anywhere
and
where you can get a stronger Wi-Fi
because
signal, that'd be great.
the no, that's okay. This is, I think, about the best. They've been having trouble with their internet connection here, but tell me when I'm starting to lose it. I'll just keep walking.
There you go. There. You're better
Okay.
there.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what ends up what's starting to occur here, in my view, is that there the lack of, and it always seems to come back to this, and I don't understand why, because people obviously don't value, in the governments, don't seem to value education to the extent that they should. And as a consequence, it seems always that education becomes the whipping post of government policy when other things are going on that are pressures or tensions in systems. And education is suffering mightily as a result of that. So what am I trying to say? I think how we're doing school really needs to be rethought completely from the ground up. And I was really hopeful, frankly, when the COVID pandemic hit. I thought, here's our chance. First time in the history of education during my lifetime that there was a cessation of the normal patterns of schooling, kids going into classrooms, into boxes, confined spaces all together, same age, same levels, et cetera. But we have a missed opportunity, because what I've discovered in working with schools and districts ever since we've come back from COVID is there's this intense desire to want to return to normalcy, whatever that means. And so instead of taking the opportunity to change the equation around how schools could function, how kids could be more prominent in owning their learning as opposed to always having to sit and listen to teachers teach. We had an opportunity that is now, in my humble opinion, a failed experiment. People were not ready to start teaching through technology. And we are still not preparing to look at how technology can advance schooling to the benefit of kids and teachers alike.
We just lost you briefly, Ainsley. It was going well until now.
Of AI and GPT and the potential that it has to any there. Chat test.
Continue moving. We'll tell you
I
when
apologize
you're.
for this. I'm
No, no worries, no worries.
Yeah.
You know, we know you're in a session. Yeah, maybe if you move around, we'll tell you when your bars turn yellow or white. There's a farther red. Okay, we'll wait for you to reconnect, Ainsley. We've lost you
Yeah, they're up
briefly.
my paper.
In the meantime,
Go to Andre.
Okay, there we go. There you are. Okay. If you want to settle down, I'm going to ask Andre a question. Andre has a unique perspective because he's not an educator, and he often says to me, "Oh, I'm not an educator." And I often reply, "That's actually an advantage." Oh, you're good there. You have a good signal there, Ainsley. And I actually say to him, "That's actually an advantage because you're not contaminated by what many of us see as unsurmountable obstacles in changing education, and you have a fresh perspective." So he and I have had numerous conversations about what you very well described, Ainsley, this perplexing state of affairs in education. But I'd love to hear what you make of education, Andrea, again from the perspective of somebody who works at the highest levels of the corporate world with accomplished executive leaders. Um, how do you see education? How is education preparing or not students for the world that is and the world that would be? You're muted, Andre.
Sorry, I was muted there. I would thank you for the question, Gabriel, and I would thank you, Ainsley, for the jumping off point. And I just wrote down one of the comments: how we're doing school needs to be completely rethought. That's Ainsley's comment, an educator of 53 years. So I appreciate that. And then we missed the opportunity during COVID to rethink and reinvent. So I guess I am an educator, at heart, Gabrielle, and you many times have said, so I work with adult education, if you want to call it that. So it's just taking education along the value stream. So I end up with the product of the school system at the end of the day in the workplace. And I couldn't agree with Ainsley more. I think, my comment to overlay onto Ainsley's thinking is that education in the space itself is one of the least disrupted things that a human enterprise that we have going today. So, ripe for disruption. Um, I'm a engineer of sorts, so I'm just curious as to why it has been so difficult and so challenging to disrupt education. And we all have a vested interest in the byproduct or the outcome of education. So the question is, why has it not been disrupted? I want to do a special shout out to a lot of the teachers that are on this feed and beyond that. There are many teachers working so tirelessly, against all odds, against government funding, against antiquated systems and structures and all of that kind of thing, to just bring education, their best thinking into the classroom. So, the example I'd use is many years ago, I came across a school called Reggio Emilia in Italy, and I may not be getting the story exactly correct, but the community came together in a small town. Now, my background is Italian, so I've researched and studied on this particular case, but the community was not happy with where education was going, so they came together and actually tore down the school. They planted a tree right in the middle of a courtyard, or there was a big tree, and they built a school, circular school around that. And they basically threw out the entire curriculum. And it started, and this is probably about 70 or 80 years ago, somewhere in there. They started this new school based on what Ainsley's saying, where students were participants and architects of their own learning. So if you had a propensity for music, you came through that portal. If you had a propensity for creativity or language, you came through those portals. And that was the precursor, my understanding, and some of you might know better than I, but that was the precursor to the Montessori system of learning, which is quite effective and impactful. So the question, I guess I would say, is how are we going to disrupt education? And I know that's where you spend a lot of your horsepower and your thought power, Gabrielle and Ainsley, on this particular topic. And maybe we can focus on that very specific thing. I'm going to use a quick example from healthcare. I'm currently working on a project that involves probably the most complex and largest system I've ever worked in, which is the healthcare system in the province of Alberta, where I live in Canada. The actual enterprise is about an $80 billion enterprise per year. And we were in a session yesterday where there's, imagine 2,000 IT people just running that enterprise with 16 petabytes, Gabriel. I know you have a propensity for math, but I can't, that's beyond it's beyond my reach. 16 petabytes of data. And now we're talking about introducing AI into the mix here. So, how do we move emergency wait times from 9 hours approximately now on average back down to 2 hours where they were probably 20 years ago? So this is a complex problem, and that's only one small segment of the entire ecosystem, if you will. So we're not talking about healthcare today, but we are talking about education. The second largest budget item in the province of Alberta, so that healthcare is the first at 80 billion, education, both K to 12 and advanced education, is about $65 billion. So a very, very, very large enterprise, and there's been quite a bit of tension between teachers and the government lately, in our neck region of the planet, if you will. So we have politics, we have antiquated systems, and we have a very large system that is very vested in maintaining the status quo. The question is, how do we disrupt that? So I'm going to stop talking right there because Ainsley and Gabrielle might have an insight, and then maybe we can come back, and if it's appropriate, Gabriel, we can try and solve that problem today, or at least not solve the problem, but at least to point the compass in the right direction.
If we do, we will write a best-selling book.
Yeah.
Andrea, I can't resist, since you brought up, and this never came up in our conversations before, since you brought up Reggio Emilia Montessori. It's so fascinating that you mentioned that, because both have been very emblematic, significant disruptions that to this very day represent a certain ideal regarding creativity and the use of spaces in schools. And they were, as you mentioned, again, very disruptions and an upheaval of the status quo. But now they've become brands, and they've become very dogmatic, both of them. And
Right.
What originally was born as a creative, very very free for all innovation now has become in both cases a very closed down proposition. Um, and I was reflecting on the nature of these innovations and how eventually, when they take hold, they become successful and dogmatic in their own way. So, and I think a lot of what the challenges that we're facing now is that people are in pursuit of the next big thing, the next big idea, the next recipe for doing stuff, no? And there's all kinds of fancy names, which I won't quote so as not to offend any of our colleagues, especially Ainsley's and my colleagues that used to work with us and are still stuck in some of those misnomers. But can we reflect a little bit on at this present time the nature of innovation? I know, Andrea, that you're a specialist in ecosystems, the metaphor of ecosystems and organizations, the organic innovation versus the systematic innovation. Um, we've had examples of schools today that are doing disruptions in their own way, very different to each other, but at the same time, they're all operating on the same principle. So I'd like to throw that out as a general theme, like at this age and time when we do need to break through and innovate, what's the nature of of innovation now?
Is that for Andre?
Ainsley, go for it. Hell dog pile.
So, I think the last time, Gabrielle, that we did 24 hours in education, the same program that we're doing right now. We went around the world to hear about special projects and innovative activities that were happening around the world. And what struck me when I was listening to many of the wonderful things that were happening, there are all kinds of examples right now where the systems have been disrupted and people have come up with different ideas, many of which are working extraordinarily well and being very productive and useful and beneficial, and the kids are loving it, and school has reinvented itself. But somehow, even with schools that are right next door to these places, they can't seem to grab the levels of enthusiasm that it takes for other people to want to get involved and look at these models in order to try and bring it to scale in some way. And for me, it baffles me as to why, when people can see exemplars of quality, exemplars of excellence, that they are right within touching distance, do people not try to emulate some of those things because it's better and it's different? And I have yet to find the answer to that particular challenge. Is why is it that in education we can't seem to, when you think about what's happening in the technology industry now, somebody comes up with an idea and all of a sudden everybody's doing it. But in education, it just doesn't happen that way. And I'm sad to say that I don't have an answer to that. Because
Can I volunteer something to that?
please.
I think it's a great example that you mentioned in terms of the technology industry and education. Um, I'm afraid that a lot of it has to do with ego, and that many of us in our profession are still have deep unresolved ego issues, both personally and organizationally. Um, so those who innovate generally are generous in sharing what they do. Uh, but there are very few people who can reinterpret those principles, make them their own, and acknowledge that their source of origin of those ideas is from somebody else. No, and so I think it is very deep. It's in the nature of why many people are in our profession. the asymmetry between teachers and students and between principals and teachers, and how we're still very much attached to an ego factor, again, both personas and organization. Whereas in the technology world, there are two fundamental differences. One is your clients are going to demand the latest innovation, so you don't have a choice. Whereas our families are still lukewarm about adopting an innovative model of schooling. So you're not yet compelled as an educator to provide that disruptive model, because it's still a shaky proposition in terms of acceptance. Many of the schools that I know, and this has happened to us, are also we struggle to convey that. And the second factor is the tech industry is full of nerds who love technology, and it's open source. And people get excited about innovation and technology, and to the point that it blinds their ego. So the idea that somebody came up with a deep learning algorithm and that spurred the revolution that we now enjoy or suffer in terms of AI, it was immediately caught upon, and it's part of the nature of the industry. But anyway, I don't want to talk so much, but I think it's a great metaphor.
Well, where was I going to say? I just had a thought and it's escaped me. I guess I'm showing my advancing age here.
No, we pulled you out of another environment, Ainsley. Sorry.
No, that's quite all right. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you, Gabrielle, but what's interesting is in North America now, the fastest growing school system is charter schools, which is where parents are demanding, to your point about in technology, the client or the consumer of the technology is demanding, faster, greater, more ubiquitous, and so forth. So in the school system that exists, but only in pockets, only to a small degree, interestingly enough. So charter schools have started to pop up around, particularly in the United States, less so here in Canada, because our system of education and how it's controlled is different than what it has in the United States. But the same thing occurs. We've got more people that are applying to go to private schools and paying ridiculous amounts of money to try and get get their kids educated in private schools, where public schools could do very well. And the public school system doesn't seem to respond to saying, what is it that's going on in private school? Well, they've got smaller classes. Oh, well, they've got higher level courses. All that is possible in the public school system, and yet the system resists trying to change that. So I remain perplexed about what it's going to take. And I think part of it lies in what I've come up with a different model of change for myself. We tend to look at wanting to have whole system change. It's too big, it's too amorphous, it's too distant from people. And so my little phrase that I like to use now is from brush fires to bonfires. I live in a province, as does Andre, that is subject to a lot of forest fires. And one of the things they do to prevent forest fires in the future is they go around having controlled burns, as they called, where they actually set parts of the forest on fire in a controlled way and burn it bare so that the forest fire can't go back. It's kind of like a barricade that the forest fire won't start to move into the town where housing is, and so forth and so on. And so I've championed this with many of the clients that I work with and many of the schools that I work with, this concept. You need two people, just two people, who are willing to pilot something and play with it, experiment with it, fail with it, learn from it, et cetera, et cetera. And what ends up happening, and I've seen it happen in schools that I've worked with, other people start to show an interest in what's going on, and then they want to come on board. Right now, the model that all governments in education seem to pursue in all provinces in Canada is, here's the initiative. The Minister of Education has pronounced this is the new curriculum, or this is the new assessment system. Thou shalt go forth and multiply and do it. Top down. As Michael Fullan used to say, it's not top down, it's bottom up, it's in the middle. I say it's brush fires. Find two people that are willing to try the new innovation and play with it for some time. Make it malleable. Change this, change that, figure it out, and learn from it, and then start to slowly, slowly, slowly invite other people to come in and start to play with it. I think that may stand a better chance of trying to push innovation through a system than trying to scale it from the top down and expecting that just by mandating it, it's going to happen. Mandates don't matter. That's my view of
Thank
the
you.
world.
Thank you, Ainsley. Andre, again, we mentioned already that you work with corporate leaders. You mentioned yourself that you're working at in a humongously big industry like healthcare in your province. And you've developed, and you're you've studied leadership extensively over the years. What is the new form of leadership in this age and time, and how do you see that happening or not in the real world? And what lessons can we derive for education?
Ooh, big questions. Can I come back to the former question?
Of course, of course, of course.
Yeah, before I go to this new forms of leadership, which is a stellar question. I really want to leave your participants today with, I'm hoping something they can take with them other than fancy thinking here to action upon. So I want to share a screen because I one of the things that I'm curious about, and I think I share this with every single person um, on this journey, the 24 hours, all of your participants, we have insatiable curiosity. Now, that's the one thing we all have in common. So I'm curious as to why things are hard to change in the realm of humanity. Why is change so difficult? And the answer to that question I'm going to offer with this quote here. I'm just going to bring that up if you can.
Machiavelli. That's going back a few days.
Yeah, in the 1500s, and I love the time frame here. It's the 1500s. This is the Renaissance. Things were so bad, in the 1400s and 1300s, that there was no choice, right? That was the forest fire you're speaking about, Ainsley.
Yep.
And the Renaissance happened, and there were innovators, there were somehow this thing happened, and we need to study how that happened because we're in that same place now as a species, as a humanity. So this is why humans can't change, in my opinion, or they're slow to change, because we have vested interests in a system that is not profitable for us to change for whatever reason. So there are so many innovators on this call, and these are the people, many of you are working tirelessly in your small corners of these large ecosystems. So many of the innovators are on this call right now as we're speaking. You're practicing while others sleep. You're on this call, learning, exploring, thinking. So, Gabrielle, you offered a human-centric challenge is what we're dealing with, right? Just out of curiosity, I did chat GPT, and the question I asked it was, what is the best way to disrupt education in Canada? And I know not everybody on the call is from Canada. This is a global perspective. Simple question. I don't want to give you a chat GPT answer, but it was so fascinating. So we know this stuff. We know how to do this. Number one, shift the content delivery to skills and capabilities and competencies. Number two, indigenous ways of knowing, and there's a whole build out on each one of these. Indigenous ways of knowing into the core, not the periphery. Number three, integrate technology thoughtfully, especially AI. Number four, reimagine the role of educators. Can you imagine this? Reimagine the role of educators. Okay, cool. Number five, embed real world learning and community partnerships. Interesting. Number six, this is the last one, fix equity gaps systemically. And I would add to that compensation and rewards, right? So we in Canada will pay a hockey player $20 million a year, But you know, the top educator makes a fraction of that. But this is the interesting part. In summary, the best way to disrupt education in Canada is to fundamentally redesign it for the world students are entering, not the one we inherited. So the world has changed so much. I don't believe the education system has kept up with that change. And most certainly, you asked me before, Gabriel, what are you seeing in the workplace? There's a dearth in the ability to do conflict, number one. Number two, which is causing all sorts of problems. Number two, we don't have systems thinkers in general. Number three, we don't have critical thinkers in general. So we need these types of thinking to solve the complex problems and complexity that we're facing today. And we have over complexified our worlds. We have over complexified it to the point where we don't know of a place to intervene in the system because we don't know who's actually making the decisions. So I would offer there's quite a bit of insight into this thing. Fundamentally, we're redesigning for a world that's going to happen. And the biggest disruptive force in my lifetime, bar none, is AI. That is going to be transformative. We won't even recognize the world in 5 years. That's I don't want to make a bold statement like that, but I believe it to be true. Because right now, our business models and our operating models are completely irrelevant to the world in which we live, and and we're in denial about it. So this egocentric challenge, I'm going to name it, start by changing ourselves, start a little, what Ainsley's called start a small fire in your corner of the ecosystem, and then somehow it's going to bring it into the forest. And from ecosystems, the forest needs a fire.
Yes.
Right? It
Correct.
absolutely needs the fire to transform and renew itself every so many years. So we're time, metaphorically speaking. I know you love metaphors, Gabriel. It's time for a forest fire. So that leads to the point about ego, forest fires, and courage. So this leadership thing, one of the things, the whole essence of leadership is about changing something. So leaders change things. But in order to change things, you are at risk because now you're disrupting the status quo and it requires courage.
Thank you, Andre. There are two themes that I'd like to touch upon because they have been sort of common themes throughout the day. One of them is related to sense of purpose, and there's almost universal consensus that one of the directions in which education should be veering is towards fostering in our students a greater sense of self and connecting with a sense of purpose that would help them navigate the uncertainties of the world, the countercultural uh, aspect of what we're trying to do in terms of values and empathy, compassion, diversity, etc. Uh, and that seems to be a common theme, no? And so the question for both of you is to start for Ainsley is how do we do that, and for Andrew is how do we deal with a young generation that for whatever reason does not have a vision of the future, or does not have an easy connection with a sense of purpose in this postmodern world. So let's start with Ainsley. How do you think? And I know you've done uh, you're doing seminal work on influence, Ainsley, and that may be one of the roots. The root causes of why we can do this, how we can do this. How can we help our students connect with their sense of purpose at this age and time?
Well, for me, first of all, I've narrowed it down in my work when I'm working with schools now to try and emphasize two simple little things. And I suppose maybe this is a little bit too finite because we end up talking about instruction, and your question is a little bit more global and ethereal than my simple little answer here. But one of the things is I think we have spent far too much time in schools worrying about what it is we need to teach kids, as opposed to, like, in other words, what to learn as opposed to how to learn. I think I think that's a single big shift that we need to get clear, that it's not about the content, because the content has not changed. Mathematics is still mathematics. Language is still language, and on it goes. History is the only thing that kind of changes, but you're always looking to the past, and the past doesn't change. It's already happened. So teaching kids how to learn as opposed to what to learn. The second trite phrase that I like to use more and more when you talk about student self-awareness is, I think that the phrase for me is that teachers need to grasp onto the mantra that teachers should never do for kids what kids can do for themselves. And I think we need to put the learning back into the hands of the learners, back into the minds of the learners. Too much of learning is dependent on what the teacher tells the student. And it's always a transmission of information as opposed to a discovery of information. We have the tools now where kids can, to go back to Andre's really valid point about insatiable curiosity, kids come into the world asking questions. And we know that the evidence tells us right now that by grade 3, they stop asking questions. They stop asking why. It's because they've learned that the pattern of school is teacher talks, student listens, and student regurgitates. We have to change the basic paradigm. And it's those two things. I think if we could start the conversation from those two things and then explore, well, what are things kids can do that I shouldn't have to do as a teacher? Other than planning, well, we can co-construct what success looks like before we start to enter into an activity on a particular topic. We can start to explore, what do the kids already know? And they know a heck of a lot more now when they come into school than they did when we were students in school. We depended on the teacher to tell us the new stuff. So we have to continue to stimulate and percolate and build on the natural curiosity kids. That's what Reggio Emilia and Montessori and so on started with. You're right, it's now become commercialized, and because it's become a business model again. They have to make money. And I think that's unfortunate. Why do kids have to report to school every day? We had this debate once, Gabrielle, when you were writing the book, the 21st Century book, a long time ago. And I said, do we need schools at all? Kids can learn without adults being present. So the self-awareness is about putting the learning back into the hands of the learner and getting them to get clear on their purpose and passion. Because kids now, when you ask the question as parents, what do you want to be when you grow up? They have no answer. And I think that's unfortunate. I'll stop there.
That's a great segue into what I wanted to ask Andrea. What do you observe in the workplace regarding, again, sense of purpose, the younger generation that is graduating from either schools or universities and seem to be not committed to their jobs and changing jobs and living day by day? And what can we do in education, in your view, to help them, again, in all selflessness, acquire a positive vision for their future, which I believe they lack at this point?
Yeah, I'm gonna co-join those two questions, Gabriel, because it's the same answer. Whether you're a young person or you're mid-career in the workforce, what's emerging as a pattern for me that answers both of those questions, the first question you asked and this one, which is around a positive vision of the future. So this is critical for us elders. I'm talking about me because I'm quite old as compared to young students. So Do you have a positive vision of the future? If you don't have that, that takes the spark, that takes the energy out of what you want to do with your life, number one. Number two, at some point, we have to be connected to purpose. If you are not connected to purpose, there is no compelling motivator to get up in the morning, get out of bed, and solve big problems.
Yep.
So when I look at young people, yesterday I hosted a salon. I was attending as a speaker at a global gathering in Calgary on it's called Future Summit, and it's studying. We're looking at the compelling question of what is the future of AI in Canada and what will it take to lead and not follow. In my session yesterday, I met a young person, 15 years old. His name was Niall.
Sorry to interrupt you just for a second, Andre. Ainsley has to go back to his group in the real in IRL in real life. So thanks, Ainsley. We'll continue the conversation at some other point, and we'll stay with Andre here for the rest of the session. Thanks. We really appreciate it, and best of luck there with Christine and the leaders.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the listeners who are blind to us. But I know that you're in good hands with Gabrielle and Andre. Andre, it's good to see you again. Andre and Gabrielle, as always, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Best of luck. Keep this going.
We will. We will. Thank you.
Bye.
You were telling us about this young person, Andre.
Yeah, so and we had, the room was jammed full of thought leaders on AI and experts and systems engineers and all of this. And I went up to this young fella and I started to talk to him, and his name was not Niall. That's his name. He's 15 years old. And I asked him, "Why are you here? What would you?" And he's just absolutely thrilled with the excitement and curiosity. But he said, "I want to be a fashion designer. I want to learn how to use AI and use the technology to be able to run my business." He's super good in math, and he wants to pursue a business career and a design career as well. So, merging business with design and fashion design. This is a 15-year-old kid, and I was blown away. So what happens, and I don't know how it happened, but he has a positive outlook on the future and the world he wants to create, and he is deeply connected to his purpose, which he's passionate about, which is bringing new design and new fashion into the world, or creating something new that doesn't exist. So in for young people and for older people, there's this thing I call activist mindset. So if you have this activist mindset, there's almost a little bit of anger or a little bit of frustration that's motivating us to drive change. They want to fix something that they don't like. So this whole idea of purpose and spawning this activist mindset, I'm just calling it that for lack of a better thing, and that's when you have that purpose. I'm going to actually offer my definition of an educator. And there are many, many educators on this call today. When you're driven by purpose, you become an educator. That's the difference between a teacher and an educator, in my view, my very humble view. So it's the passion for the subject matter that compels you to be an educator. That's who you are at the fiber and the core of your being. That would be an example of you or Ainsley. And again, many people on the call. So I don't know. I had purpose and this curiosity to compel young people to discover what their purpose is. Once they have that, they will seek out the learning they need to bring new ideas, new thinking, or at least their art or their creation into the world. That's
Andre, I thought it was fascinating that you opened up saying that um, we need to paint a positive vision for the future, no? Uh, and I was thinking that may very well be an explicit objective of school these days. That and ranking very very near the top of the learning goals in a school, that we graduate students who have a positive outlook on the future of the world. Now, the great disconnect is that if you were to examine schools all over the world in terms of how they do that, 99.9% don't do that at all. It's not even an implicit objective. It's not, and it's not an explicit objective. And I can see a lot of wisdom in that at this age and time, with all that we're facing, with the perplexing world that we live in, where many of our core values seem to be countercultural. School has a function, a societal role to paint a not so bleak vision of the future. But we don't do that. We're not even close to doing that. And if any school were to reassess their mission and say, okay, we're creating graduates that have a positive vision of the future, that school would probably be accused of not really tackling some of the dire issues that are out there.
Yeah. You, Gabrielle, you and I have had many flight hours on this conversation. This is linked to storytelling. So, the bleak vision of the future is inherent because many of our, and I hate to bring politics into this conversation, but our politicians, the leaders of my country, um, whether at the national level, provincial level, or municipal level, um, one capability that they don't seem to have is this visionary paint me a picture of a preferred future. That's the starting point. This is the world we can create. And for me, through storytelling, to be able to build and paint a compelling vision of the future, that's what's going to motivate people or move them into that direction. So it's a storytelling issue. I think to your point, we should be more explicit in our education system about this creating, a future world, or a future that at least we want to live in or can see ourselves in. And then you asked, I want to come back to the question because it was a really big question. What are the new forms of leadership? And, that question stopped me cold, but my brain has been processing that question for the last 10 minutes. And I'm going to offer you this one. The new form of leadership is linking empathy into that mix because there doesn't seem to be enough empathy in the world right now. And we need it more than anything else in the leadership space. And I think that's just so seminal and important as leaders. And we are training large language models, AI, open AI, on many fronts, uh, on systems, on engineering, on mathematics, on binary, and all of that comes from the internet. And the internet's a pretty dark place. So we're not training AI to have empathy and to have feeling and emotion. I don't know if we can, but we're certainly not doing that now. So the new form of leadership will link empathy into it. Um, and I think it's important. I don't know. But what a great question.
We are welcoming Susanna, who's going to lead the next segment. And again, we're in the company of friends.
I know, yeah. Thanks so much for letting me come on early because I was loving the conversation with Andre and Ainsley, and feeling inspired from work that we've all done together over the years. So sorry to jump in early. I just was so excited. Hi.
Take me out. I'm Tag, you're it. You're on.
I love that, right? What a great concept.
Yeah.
I love what you were just saying, though. That's really, Andre, what you're headed into. I'm so excited for me anchoring the thing coming from Hawaii and the aloha spirit, because I think we share that of like, what does it mean to be a good human is really the big question. And that's what we need to be focusing on. So I love what you were saying so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
And we're coming full circle now, and it's not coincidental that Canada, Hawaii, New Zealand, when we started, these are
wow.
three geographical regions that pay homage and respect ancestral wisdom and indigenous cultures. And we're coming back full circle in education, also recognizing not only the legitimate wisdom of ancestral cultures, but also that at this age and time, with all the modernity and AI and what have you, a lot of that is still current. No, um, the final one, and Andrea, before we free you.
Before
Yeah.
you ask me another giant question, Gabriel, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Can I close out and hand it off to Susanna? And I'd love to stay and, listen to some of her wisdom and insight. But just on a couple of notes. One is Indigenous knowledge, and the second one is the work we've done together. So, an example of innovation, Susanna, we came together, a group of us, and said, how might we disrupt the education system? Started this thing called the Next Learner Space,
Yeah.
and we asked the question, what's not being taught or focused on in schools? And we came up with 5 things. And this was after a long process of discovery, right? It was self,
Yeah.
it was community, it was nature, it was technology, and it was leadership. So that's how we started. And then we invited a global group, I think we ran about 5 or 6, possibly 7 cohorts of young people. And we called them in the middle enterprising. Imagine a donut, enterprising. That was the core of it. Enterprising educators, enterprising young people, youth, and enterprising teenagers. So, K to 12. Then we had young adults like 18 to 28. And just did some fabulous work. So that's an example of innovation that we just pulled some people together, thought leaders, and created something and tried it. Um, Alls we need now, and hopefully, is a check for 2, 3, 4, $5 million so we can scale it. Um, and that will come. That will come. But I do want to close on Indigenous knowledge. If I can find my notes here from last night. We did what's called in Canada, we're doing, there's a big conversation right now going on around reconciling with Indigenous people. And what we do at the beginning of many meetings, and I just want to read this to you because the end part is really fascinating to me. So I would start a meeting and a gathering. I think I had a couple hundred people in the room last night. So I would say, I would like to acknowledge that we gather today on traditional territories in my region of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina Nation and the Nakota, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney. Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. This is the part, we honor the long-standing relationships that Indigenous peoples have with this land and recognize their histories, their cultures, and their contributions that continue to enrich our community. May this acknowledgement be a reminder of our shared responsibility to learn, to listen, and to walk forward together in the spirit of respect and reconciliation. So, the point about bringing Indigenous wisdom and knowledge into the education space is critical because many humans have walked before us. And so, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. This Indigenous knowledge exists. Gabriel, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Andre. As usual, it's been a super interesting conversation.
I so want to stay on this call and listen to Susanna. Unfortunately, I have to jump off. Can I go back on and
Yeah.
view?
Come back in. Yeah. It will be there. I've been watching them live, like the stuff I missed while I was sleeping last night. And so it's great. Gabrielle, you've done such a great job of putting this together and also making it accessible for people to see at their leisure.
Yeah.
So like
we're actually going to stop the live stream now so that we can upload the segment. The segment is available right away.
that's so great.